Okay. All right. Well, so first, of course, happy Father's Day. Um, this is a special convergence of holidays, actually, with Father's Day and Juneteenth on the same day. And so, being a unique day, I felt it was a good day for a unique talk. Um, I was saying to Neil, I don't know, it might be a kind of painful, but then he's like, oh yeah, you're always talking about pain. I'm like, I guess I am. I'm always talking about fear and suffering and and so forth, but it's always with the hope of transcendence, right? How to overcome and transcend fear and suffering. Um, so um, but I want to first give fathers their due recognition. Would all fathers, stepfathers, adoptive fathers, men who have raised children, raise your hands? We have Leon, Bob, Neil. All right. Well, thank you to all of you for raising your children and providing that parental input. And happy Father's Day to you. My father is in New Jersey today, and he is undoubtedly still sleeping, which is his right as an 85-year-old man. He likes to sleep in, so I'll call him later on today. I wish him happy Father's Day. So because of the combination of occasions today, Juneteenth and Father's Day, I feel like it was time to talk about something that I have a lot of deep personal experience with, which is being a Black father. Nobody's laughing. That was a joke. But, so, that's, obviously not true, but I did have the help of a dear friend who is a Black father who went over this talk with me, and I'm very grateful for that because I was really struggling. It's not easy to put oneself in the place of somebody whose experience is so far outside of one's own experience. But I personally believe in the importance of walking in another person's shoes for a mile, as they say. And to for the next 20 minutes to have the opportunity to look at fatherhood as through the lens of a Black father. And I'd also like to go back historically and went all the way back to slavery, realizing the present is the result of the past, and that I also knew nothing about what it meant to be a father in the days of slavery. I had never even heard or read anything about those experiences before or that perspective. So on my first Google search, I was surprised that immediately someone's master thesis came up called The Representation of Fatherhood as a Declaration of Humanity in 19th Century Slave Narratives. Now, I was struck by that title as fatherhood as a declaration of humanity. In this master's thesis, the author acknowledges that while motherhood is widely discussed, and we have all heard the wrenching stories of children being torn away at the auction block, there is rarely anything mentioned about the experience of fathers who happen to be enslaved. The author of the paper discussed the book Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, which is a true story written by a former slave, and I have read it. It was a former slave who eventually attains her freedom, and the author, Harriet Jacobs, presents the challenges of fatherhood for enslaved Black men during the story by illustrating the difficulty of assuming paternal authority while unable to practice personal autonomy. She states, quote, "For Black fathers in slave narratives, fatherhood is a choice that is independent of social obligation or legal bonds." This really struck me in the fact that I now see fatherhood for enslaved men as necessarily even working against the forces that were in opposition to Black men acting as fathers to their children. under these circumstances that were systematically striving to tear families apart. To the men in these texts, fatherhood is a cornerstone of humanity. To embody the role of father is to combat the attempted erasure of the humanity of themselves and their families. So, in slave narrative representations, slavery hinders a man's ability to fulfill the role of father, and then points to enslaved men's diminished ability as a sign of insufficient masculinity. They're between a rock and a hard place. Black men were not given the personal liberty to be able to honor their parents, defend their wives, or protect their children. Even their own sense of masculine sexuality was denied them by the fact that Black enslaved men were used and represented as breeding stock. Enslaved fathers were erased from the consciousness of society at large and made inconsequential and essentially invisible to their children. So in the struggle to establish a authoritative relationship with their children, such fathers' model, their only model, was the white master. And even while the master's tyranny was harmful to the enslaved men and women, it was also the only example that enslaved men had of free and successful masculinity. In one instance, it is difficult to practice authority when you're not granted your own autonomy. And in another instance, it's dangerous and difficult to challenge the authority of the master. There is an instance described in Life of a Slave Girl that illustrates the struggle of assuming paternal authority as a slave. The book's protagonist is named Linda, and her father attempts to practice authority over his son, Linda's brother. But he's frustrated because both he and his child have the authority of the master and mistress enforced upon them. Quote, "My father, by his nature, as well as by the habit of transacting business as a skillful mechanic, had more of the feelings of a free man than is common among slaves. My brother was a spirited boy, and being brought up under such influences, he early detested the name of master and mistress. One day, when his father and his mistress both happened to call him at the same time, he hesitated between the two, being perplexed to know which had the strongest claim upon his obedience. He finally concluded to go to his mistress. When my father reproved him for it, he said, 'You both called me, and I didn't know which I ought to go to first.' 'You are my child,' replied our father, 'and when I call you, you should come immediately, if you have to pass through fire and water.' And you can imagine that the child may well have to pass through fire and water if he were to disobey his mistress. So some key themes from the story will also reverberate throughout the talk. And I'll just read through some of those. Of course, there's the economics of slavery, the quest for freedom, pain and suffering, both physical and emotional, fear and terror, survival against great odds, pervasive injustice, self-definition, self-assertion, community support and family loyalty, and even writing as a means of freedom, self-expression, and resistance. These themes can be seen through other illustrations of Black fatherhood and as patterns across the centuries and decades. So how would it feel to walk in these people's shoes, to see things through the perspective of enslaved Black fathers? How would it feel to live under such powerful repression, with your very humanity stripped away by every social, political, and legal system? Your very life and well-being rested on the whims of the people who owned you, and your body, mind, and soul existed only to meet their needs. How would it feel to be an enslaved Black father, knowing how powerless you are to protect and care for your children? Frederick Douglass, a Black father who escaped slavery, became a passionate opponent of slavery and oppression. Frederick Douglass's children were born in the time of slavery. How would your perception change as an oppressed father, knowing that your children could be apprehended at any moment and sold into slavery? It must have been like living under a pall of fear and injustice at all times. Many of you are familiar with his famous speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July?" It was delivered in 1852 in Rochester, New York, at a meeting organized by the Rochester Ladies Anti-Slavery Society. Douglass said that the fathers of the nation were great statesmen and that the values expressed in the Declaration of Independence were, quote, saving principles and the ring bolt of your nation's destiny, stating, stand by those principles, be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and whatever cost. However, he maintained that slaves owed nothing to and had no positive feelings toward the founding of the United States. He faulted America for utter hypocrisy and betrayal of those values in maintaining the institution of slavery. Quote, what have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than any other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him your celebration is a sham. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. End quote. On one 4th of July in the past, I went to Frederick Douglass's home, which is a national park in Southeast DC, and I highly recommend this experience. Now we move to the time of Civil War, 1861 to 1865, where we see some minor allowances of black males being able to participate in the army and fight for their own emancipation. At the stroke of midnight on January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation came into effect and declared enslaved people in the Confederacy free on the condition that the Union won the war. Can you imagine how that condition must have motivated the black soldiers to fight ever harder for their lives and the lives of their families? Everything rested on the Union's victory. By the end of the war, 200,000 black soldiers had joined the fight and spreading news of freedom as they fought their way through the South. However, since Texas was one of the last strongholds of the South, emancipation would be a long time coming for enslaved people in that state. Even after the last battle of the Civil War was fought in 1865, a full 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, many enslaved people still did not know that they were free. As the story goes, the last of the enslaved people in the U.S. learned of their freedom after Union General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, and announced that the president had issued a proclamation freeing them a full 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was in force. Thus, we have the holiday of Juneteenth today, recently made a national holiday. Galveston, the birthplace of this holiday, sits on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico about 50 miles from Houston. With Granger's announcement, June 19th became a day to celebrate the end of slavery in Texas. As newly freed Texans began moving to neighboring states, Juneteenth celebrations spread across the South and beyond. Early Juneteenth celebrations included church services, public readings of the Emancipation Proclamation, and social events like radios and dances. I don't know about you all, but I did not know all of these things about Juneteenth. I knew about Juneteenth before it was made a public holiday, but only within the last few years. National holiday. Thus, we have the holiday of June. Sorry, I'm repeating myself. So these Juneteenth celebrations, as I said, included church services and public readings of the Emancipation Proclamation and social events. However, many Southern Black communities were forced to celebrate Juneteenth on the outskirts of town due to racism and Jim Crow laws. To ensure they had a safe place to gather, Juneteenth groups would often collectively purchase plots of land in the city on which to celebrate. So how does that feel? How would that feel to have to work, to give money and raise money just so you could have a safe place to hold your celebrations? Can you see how moving from being enslaved to free, yet still living in an oppressed environment and seen as a lesser human purely because of your skin color could affect your identity as a man and a father? What was actually in your power to give your children a better life? Yesterday, I participated in the second annual Juneteenth celebration in Warrenton, Virginia. Last year, the celebration was down the hill in the park, reminiscent to me, as I reflected on this, reminiscent of the past, where the celebrations had to be in the shadows. This year, thanks to the work of the Fauquier NAACP, the Juneteenth celebration was on Main Street in Old Town Warrenton. And it was a lot of fun. It was a great celebration. Dancing and music and lots of powerful speaking. So not to get too far off the topic of Black fatherhood, but I think it worth mentioning the present success given the past struggles to bring Juneteenth celebrations into the mainstream. After the Civil War, enslaved people were freed, but remained social outcasts in the dominant white society. African Americans were segregated from employment and educational opportunities and relegated to living in the poorest, most dilapidated neighborhoods, some of which remain the most notorious inner city neighborhoods in contemporary America. The compounding effect of those socio-environmental factors is one of the primary reasons why lower educational achievement, unemployment, and underemployment still remain at epidemic levels in most inner city communities, which tend to be predominantly people of color. So in some ways, we are seeing these conditions being carried through from enslavement to the present. Now to this daily terror, add historical trauma for Black Americans. Historical trauma is defined as the cumulative emotional and psychological wounding over the lifespan and across generations emanating from massive group trauma experiences. I think we can safely define slavery as a massive group trauma experience. So this is the broad view, the historical perspective. But to really empathize and experience to empathize with the experiences of Black fathers, it's critical to listen to their stories. Here are some words written by a Black father. Quote, "And then there's what you tell your kids. That leaves a mark as well. The conversation, the one about the looming threat of police violence, takes place in the painful present. It requires a level of honesty that takes time to muster. I had the conversation with my 6-year-old just a few days ago, but I'd been preparing for years. How had I prepared? I did something too few Black men and far too few Black fathers do. I put myself in therapy. And I'm not talking about the gym as my therapy or I have therapeutic chats with my bro. I'm talking about sit your ass down, $100 an hour therapy. I've been going as needed for decades. While all dads probably should have an emotional sounding board, Black dads need more significant support. We must work through our fears of state-sponsored violence, our experiences with institutional bias, and our own internalized attitudes about our worth in order to exist in the world with the same reassuring confidence so many of our white friends inherited from their fathers. Guiding my children, coaching the next generation of diverse entrepreneurs, supporting organizations making a difference, and using my power to vote are in my providence. But stopping Black people from being murdered, it's not something I alone can fix. It's not something I can upwardly mobile away. It's a collective responsibility. My father and my father's father and so on have talked to their sons about the systemic racism on which America is built. It's time for more white fathers to do the same. You can help with that." End quote. So the experience of this Black father reflect back on some of the key themes I spoke of earlier, seeing examples of people struggling for self-definition, self-identity, pain and suffering, and especially this father's desire to reduce the pain and suffering of his children through his own efforts to heal himself and prepare his children for the harsher realities of the world, for people of color. You can perhaps see the effects of historical trauma on him and his struggle, but can you feel them too? Finally, I would be remiss during a church service not to mention the importance of Christianity through the history of Black experience in America. When all seems hopeless and society is telling you in 100 ways that you are worthless, and even the Declaration of Independence does not apply to you, faith in God, in the words of the Bible, must have been the bedrock. The Black church provided much of the rationale and motivation for the liberation activities of the civil rights era. Countless Black preachers claimed that the Bible, and especially the Gospels, called Christians to work for the betterment of African Americans. They preached that true Christianity demanded attention to and effort toward the liberation of oppressed peoples and the recognition of our innate equality in God's eyes as beings created in his image. Martin Luther King Jr. even proclaimed that, quote, any religion which professes to be concerned about the souls of men and is not concerned about the social and economic conditions that scar the soul is a spiritually moribund religion, end quote. Parishioners were convinced to become activists, not in spite of their religion, but because of it. So, the fact that my own life is so distant from the life of a Black father is what makes it so important to dive into the experience to the degree that I'm capable. It is not a new effort to me, but imagining the specific experience of Black fatherhood is. It's moving to me, the complexity of what some people have to deal with just living and breathing and walking in public and trying to live in this life that most of us take for granted. When I walk out my door, I don't have to worry about somebody calling the police on me or on my father or my siblings. Walking a mile in another's shoes is worthy on its own. A mile is not very far, but it's more than a brief reflection. It takes about 20 minutes to walk a mile, approximately the length of this talk. So thank you for walking it with me. It's worthy to recognize, it's better to empathize, and it is best to take action. Action as fathers in support of other fathers. If we can take the time to listen and understand another's challenges, then we can more readily imagine what might actually help, or what we can do. My friend Maurice, who helped me with this talk, recommended Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is a Black author and a father who wrote a book in the form of a letter to his 15-year-old son. It is called Between the World and Me. And though I don't have the time to include it, I recommend it to you all. From my review, it looks like essential reading. So that concludes the talk today, and I hope that you have gained something from it. To reflect on our experience, I would like to move directly into the silence. I invite you to close your eyes and come back to yourself, into the presence of spirit, and take this opportunity to connect with your higher self. Our higher selves know the truth. This is the realm of compassion, where we can feel what it's like to walk in a world that you never knew, to experience on a heartfelt level what it would be like to face aggression or opposition, not because of the content of your character, but because of your skin tone, the one thing you have absolutely zero control over. What could you do to help yourself feel safe? What would you tell your children? What would you do to help them feel safe? What might you do to heal? Knowing that by healing ourselves, we heal the world. And how would you pray? And for what would you pray? Hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
Thank you, Melanie, for a multifaceted message, historical and spiritual and otherwise. And if I inferred in the beginning that all your talks were painful, I humbly apologize
It was
because it's a lie. I never said that. I was I was looking at uh, some additional information, and just to reiterate, religious leaders and the local YMCA signed a petition started by Dodd, that's DODD, not Dad, not DAD, to create a day of honoring fathers. Then on June 19th, 1910, Spokane, Washington's mayor and Washington State's governor signed proclamations to celebrate the first Father's Day. And there's another thing about in 1996, President Lyndon Johnson issued the first presidential proclamation honoring fathers, designating the third Sunday in June as Father's Day. Now, I know will never be as famous as Mother's Day. There's no way we can compete with Mother's Day. And if we tried to, oh my God. So it's not even worth it's not even worth it. But I'd like you to all unmute your screens and share what you would like, and we'll continue the recording until the end of sharing, and then I'll stop the recording. And those of you that were refused to share can share whatever on your mind, knowing that you're not being recorded.
And
Your thoughts.
I do also have a song to share at some point, wherever you would like me to do that if we have time. I don't know. I might have gone like way over.
No, you didn't. I just did. So, comments. Yes, Patty.
Oh, are we being recorded? Can you take it off recording or?
No, you save it. Save your. I'd like to use this so people can have their thoughts recorded, and the rest of the congregation can hear it. So save your thoughts to after I stop the recording. Is that fair?
Okay.
Good. Okay. Those of you that would like to be recorded, or yes,
How about if I do the song and then we can stop the recording and then share comments?
you can do that too. I'm up to whatever the congregation wants. Well, almost whatever the congregation wants.
Whatever I was planning on saying, I would like to be available for anyone who happens to tune in.
Okay, Bob.
Go ahead.
Is it my turn now?
Yes.
It is obviously, Bob.
Thank you very much, Melanie, for a very, very timely presentation, and the detail and the love that you express for all people is a wonderful reflection on your person, you and your beliefs. A course teaches us that forgiveness is impossible unless we're able to withhold our desire to believe we are capable of judging the person before us. And there is one of the things that you've struck me in your talk, the removal of masculine authority by being enslaved and being voiceless is the white man's biblically supported idea that Beelzebub is irrelevant and no more than an animal equal to a horse or a donkey or a cow, goat or a sheep. And that is counter to what Jesus' story. So all the religious people who believe they're special fly in the face of ever being able to forgive. And I don't want to just be an opinionated father, but I believe the teachings of Jesus say that you can associate with a tax collector or the prostitute or even the Pharisee on equal terms. No one is better than anyone else, and no one is better than you.
And thank you, Bob. Pastor Bob has spoken and recorded.
Thank you.
Anybody else, or if there's nobody else that wants to offer? Yeah, Leon, please.
Thank you, Melanie, for the talk this morning. And thank you, Bob, for elaborating on that. As I listen to this, I'm struck by the resiliency of faith and love. Um, if you watch Finding Your Roots on PBS, the Black folks and the Black fathers, right after they were emancipated and after the Civil War, made great strides in reconstructing families and in fashioning their own communities at some point. And they did it amazingly fast in some cases. Michael Strayhorn's family, for example. But I won't prattle on anymore. I will ask, however, Melanie, if you have it in your notes off the top of your head, who the author is of the book that you mentioned, Between the World and Me. I missed that personally.
Yes. His name is Ta-Nehisi Coates, and let me spell that for you. The first name is T-A dash capital N-E-H-I-S-I. Last name Coates, C-O-A-T-E-S.
Coates. Good.
The name of the book again?
Between the World and Me.
Thank you, Melanie.
Yes, thank you. Frank?
Yeah, let's see. Okay, you can hear me. When you were talking about, the ancestral energy being there from all the years of slavery, I'm always amazed that, and I guess I know about 4 or 5 guys that came from other countries. They grew up there and then they came here, African American or Haitian, whatever. But they do really well. And I asked them, a couple of them, I said, how can you function around? He says, I just ignore them. He says, in my country, I do what I do. I know what I do, and when I come here, people want to be ignorant. I just ignore them. That's basically what they were saying. But they don't have the history of all the years of, redlining, can't get into unions, police injustice. So, they seem to be, well, just flows off their back. They just think I'm an ignorant American, I guess. But I really see the history as a miasm. It's in the actual energy field of a lot of African Americans. That's just an observation. And
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a totally different perspective. Somebody who's native from another country.
yeah, I had a patient that was from Nigeria. This guy he was bigger than life. Everybody was his friend. And I can imagine a lot of African American people not being able to put that energy out because they would feel. Although I think it's changing. I think there's a lot more improvement, more people moving up and economically, but still a lot to go. It's my feeling anyway.
That reminds me of a story I cut out of the talk, but it wasn't terribly relevant. But in this context, I am in my job as a orientation and mobility specialist. I'm teaching a man who was born in Liberia, and I really didn't know anything about Liberia. And he very proudly told me that Liberia was founded by freed black slaves and is modeled on the United States style of government, has a virtually the same flag, except with just one star. English is the national language. They brought the music over, Southern roots music, now kind of combined with the African traditional music. The art, like the just a lot, and the capital is Monrovia, named for James Monroe. So I found all that to be pretty interesting, and the fact that I think that that his pride in that probably is explained by what you just said, Frank, which is coming from another country, being born in another country, he doesn't have that historical trauma and the perspective of of American people who have been in America for generations.
Well, thank you, Frank and Melanie. And I'm glad you got that in, Melanie, because this is why I like to keep the recording going, because sometimes there's tremendous context that goes along with the message. Anybody else, real quick, and then yes.
I'll just say just a couple of words. I just, once again, Melanie, my dear friend, you just inspire and touch my heart with your words of wisdom. I will just, this question to ponder, and this is so perfectly dovetails with I'm in a book club, but this whole idea of the question of what it means to be an American, and what your talk kind of made me, a little revelatory in the sense that, America is like a vessel, and it's, the bandwidth is wide, and, there's room for everybody. And I just, that healing that goes on, that we just, continue to evolve and realize our humanity with everyone, that, as Bob said, none of us are better or less than anybody else. So thank you, my dear friend.
Sophia.
Okay, then, Melanie, you want to grace us with the song, and then we'll stop the recording.
Okay, sure. So this is a song I have done for you guys in the past, years ago, but this seemed like an apropos time to do it again. It's called Humanity, and I just think that I did write it. I'm just going to make sure that that everybody is muted, just because I know. This. Okay. Here I am, facing you, and all that I can see is all the genes and culture made you physicality. Your eyes, your skin, your nose, your teeth, the style of your hair, your makeup, jewelry, tall or short, the clothes that you wear. Why I think I know you just because of how you look. My judgment makes me sorry I have just mistook all the things about you that I cannot see. There's more to you than meets the eye, like all humanity. So I pray for the day when all I can see is what God made you, your soul and your humanity. Oh, your humanity. Here I am listening, and all that I perceive are all the things you say and do with which I disagree. Your politics, your football team, the way you live your life, religion, race, is gay or straight, all things that bring us strife. Opinions seem like everything when I think I'm right. For some reason I will fight you day and night. I learned to fear the people that are different from me, but we're all the same in heart and soul, we're just humanity. So I see the day when I will accept that all that matters is love and your humanity. Oh, your humanity. Our hopes, our dreams, our needs, our fears, our generosity, believing in each other and the drive to succeed. Our kindness, love, compassion, and companionship we share, overcoming pain and hardships. Truth is everywhere. Yeah. Now here is the day. Sorry. When all we can see is what God made us, our love and our humanity, our humanity, our humanity, our humanity. I focus on the love inside of who's in front of me. My heart is open to the good of who you're meant to be. Your lips, your teeth, your nose, your hair, the beauty of your skin. Your heritage, your height, your weight, the character within. Your politics, your football team, the smile that you wear. Your kindness, love, compassion, and the soul that's shining there.